The grand conclave of the Cathar sovereignty was not designed for the aesthetics of light, but for the gravitas of pressure, a colossal subterranean cathedral of woven ferrosilicate where atmospheric density was maintained at 3 times standard pressure, forcing every decision, every pronouncement, to carry the crushing weight of physical reality. Deep violet plasma pulsed along the structural ribs of the high vault, casting long, distorted shadows across the tiered seating where the ancient, segmented bodies of the elders rested, their crystalline optical arrays dimmed in acknowledgement of the unfolding catastrophe. For 3 standard cycles, the sovereignty had endured the relentless, grinding advance of the Vareth hegemony, and now the terminal phase had begun. The holographic projection dominating the central void showed the red, necrotic stain of Vareth occupation spreading across the final defensive lattice around the capital nexus. Silence, heavy and suffocating, had settled upon the conclave, broken only by the rhythmic, low-frequency hum of the life support systems struggling against the emotional exhaustion of millennia. High Elder Xylos, whose designation marked an unbroken lineage of political stewardship spanning 11,000 orbital rotations, flexed the primary joint of his decision arm, a subtle movement that nonetheless generated a discernible ripple in the pressurized atmosphere, drawing the immediate, strained attention of the other 412 presiding members. Xylos's tertiary optical organs were focused, not on the immediate, losing battle displayed in stark red, but on a single aberrant trace signature that had appeared in the very heart of the conflict zone, a signature that defied every known parameter of established galactic taxonomy. It was a single contact, tiny and irrelevant against the backdrop of the overwhelming Vareth tide, yet its presence was a jagged tear in the fabric of Cathar certainty. "Minister Zaren," Xylos articulated, his voice a low, resonant vibration that cut through the silence, amplified only slightly by the environmental regulators, "restate the metrics of the unknown contact. Be precise. Omit the philosophical conjectures of the analyst corps." Tactical Minister Zaren, positioned on the lower tier, shifted his weight, his chitinous armor scraping softly against the polished floor, a sound of profound disrespect in such a setting, but indicative of the desperation gripping the military apparatus. Zaren's primary function was logistics and defense. His worldview was rigid, dictated by sensor reports and resource allocation. High Elder, the contact, designated Aegis, remains within the parameters previously established. Non-Cathar, non-Vareth, originating from unmapped vectors outside the established hyperdimensional exchange corridors. Its energy signature is unstable, highly localized, and demonstrates an efficiency curve that violates the accepted power generation limits of Type-II stellar constructs. Most critically, Elder, its operational profile is irrational. It is not fleeing the Vareth advance. It is engaging it. A collective, subsonic murmur rippled through the tiers, a physical manifestation of Cathar anxiety. They were an ancient civilization built upon the principle of calculated survival, where every action was predicated on maximizing long-term stability. The Vareth were relentless, driven by a biological imperative for expansion, predictable only in their overwhelming destructive capacity. But this Aegis was an unknown variable that exceeded the tolerance for anomaly within their strategic matrix. "Engaging," repeated Xylos, the word weighted with profound skepticism. "A singular vessel facing a projected assault mass that includes multiple heavy cruiser equivalents and supporting dreadnought screening formations. Zaren, your analysis unit continues to feed us contradictory data. What is the tactical purpose of this vessel? Is it an observation drone?" "A self-destructing projectile aimed at clearing a path for a hidden fleet." "Elder, we have exhausted all logical explanations," Zaren confessed, the admission a professional humiliation. "The Aegis has not employed any high-yield kinetic or energy projection weapons recognizable by our combat protocols. Instead, its engagement seems centered around the localized manipulation of environmental factors within the immediate spatial area. Data Stream 74 Gamma indicates significant, short-duration alterations in inertial dampening fields around Vareth vessels attempting to execute offensive maneuvers. The Vareth ships are not being destroyed. They are being rendered incapable of coherent navigation. They are stumbling into each other, or simply drifting inertially into the gravitational wells of the surrounding stellar remnants. It is not war, Elder. It is disruption." Xylos closed his primary optical lens, focusing his internal processing unit on the imp. Locations, disruption. The Cathar understood war as the measured expenditure of resources to achieve strategic territorial control. The Varith understood war as consumption. This new actor, this Aegis, appeared to treat conflict not as a struggle for dominance, but as a temporary, localized problem in physics requiring immediate, efficient rectification. This conceptual difference was terrifying. The Varith response demanded Counselor Threll, whose faction represented the shattered industrial centers currently bearing the brunt of the hegemony's attack. Furious, Zarin reported. They have diverted significant assault assets toward the Aegis, interpreting its actions as a calculated, if technologically baffling, defense of the Cathar line. The Varith are not accustomed to anything standing in their path without demanding tribute or immediate surrender. They are treating it as a new threat vector, diverting attention away from the primary assault conduits targeting Nexus 9. In a strictly quantitative sense, the Aegis, by its mere presence and chaotic intervention, has stabilized the collapse of the central defensive sector for the past 72 cycles. The conclave descended back into an agonizing hum. The single, unknown ship was holding a line that entire, well-provisioned Cathar fleets had failed to maintain. It was an absurdity that invalidated every strategic doctrine developed over millennia. Their collective identity, built on technological superiority and ancient wisdom, was being undermined by a single, impossible intrusion. Analyze the probability of this being a Varith psychological operation, Threll pressed. Probability near zero, Zarin countered, consulting his integrated data pad. The Varith are incapable of deploying technology with this degree of kinetic subtlety. Their philosophy dictates brute force and overwhelming presence. This Aegis utilizes energy equivalent to a small mining drone to neutralize battleship equivalents. It is highly efficient, highly restrained, and utterly alien. Xylos felt the familiar, cold dread of existential revelation. They had spent cycles fearing the obvious, massive threat of the Varith. Now they were paralyzed by the threat of the subtle asterisk, the asterisk unknown. He focused again on the tactical projection. The Aegis asterisk, a mere blip of cold white light against the red tide, executed a sudden, massive spatial relocation, appearing instantly behind a large Varith deployment attempting to flank the Cathar orbital defenses. There was no warp signature, no jump drive discharge, only an instantaneous shift in location followed by the immediate manifestation of short-range, highly focused energy fields that momentarily enveloped and rendered inert the Varith engines. "It is fighting for us," Xylos stated, the phrase heavy with implication, but without communication, without alliance, without even recognition. Why would an advanced power expend resources to save a dying polity they do not know, against an enemy that poses no immediate, direct threat to their own sphere of influence? The logic fails. This was the core of the panic. Cathar society was built on transactional integrity. Aid was always reciprocal, or it was a prelude to conquest. Unconditional defense was an ethical non sequitur, a dangerous anomaly that suggested a motivation they could not classify. They feared the potential cost more than the immediate Varith attack. "We must attempt communication, Elder," Zarin urged. "If this is a power capable of such efficiency, we cannot risk alienating it. They have proven they do not require our assistance to survive. We require theirs." Xylos slowly extended his primary digit, a gesture indicating the most severe caution. "Initiate the full diplomatic protocol. Use the ancient language of formalized respect, the third dialect of harmony. Frame the request not as a demand for aid, but as an inquiry into shared cosmological objectives. And Zarin, prepare the fleet assets currently surrounding Nexus 12. If this Aegis proves hostile or demands terms that compromise the sovereignty's future independence, you are authorized to engage. We will not trade one master for another." The conclave acknowledged the high-stakes decision, the weight of their potential survival resting upon a philosophical puzzle embodied by a single, silent ship. The atmosphere in the chamber thickened, the low-frequency hum vibrating against their very bone structures as the Cathar attempted to categorize the terrifying concept of pure, unmotivated power. The transmission channel remained silent for 17.4 standardized Cathar cycles after the complex, highly coded message of introduction and inquiry was broadcast toward the position of the Aegis. During this agonizing wait, the single ship continued its uncanny dance of disruption, now focused on protecting a critical energy distribution satellite that the Varith were attempting to overload. The Cathar moan. Itering stations reported zero fluctuation in the Aegis Asterisk's internal energy signature. The expenditure of resources seemed trivial compared to the effects achieved. This efficiency was the silent, paralyzing threat. When the reply finally arrived, it did not utilize the formal, elaborate structure of the Cathar Third dialect. It was instantaneous, direct, and delivered through a channel of pure, unmodulated linguistic syntax, stripped bare of cultural ornamentation, a style the Cathar categorized as brutally utilitarian, or, perhaps more terrifyingly, completely honest. The primary image that resolved in the conclave's central void was startling in its lack of intimidation. It was not the projected, overwhelming force of an unknown hypercivilization, nor the monstrous biological horror of the Varith. It was a single bipedal entity, clearly biological, standing against a backdrop that suggested a small, utilitarian command bridge. The being possessed a symmetry and structure that suggested high-gravity evolution, clothed in a simple, dark uniform devoid of excessive rank insignia or ceremonial display. Its face was an open field of expression, dominated by two large optical lenses. The Cathar recognized this species only from deeply archived, pre-contact speculative models, labeling them humans, creatures whose history suggested a chaotic, self-destructive, but terrifyingly adaptive evolutionary path. The human spoke, and the translation software, straining under the conceptual simplicity of the phrasing, provided the synthesized voice. "This is Commander Elias Vance, captain of the United Earth Stellar Survey Vessel Aegis of Sol ***. We received your query regarding our intervention. We understand your current tactical and political predicament. We are stabilizing the situation. Stand down your defensive fleets and divert all remaining resources toward humanitarian staging. We do not require assistance or explanation at this time." The conclave, conditioned by millennia of hierarchical political interaction, reeled from the sheer audacity of the command, stabilizing the situation. The Cathar were a civilization facing extinction, and this single entity spoke of their struggle as a temporary inconvenience being **managed**. High Elder Xylos felt a sudden, profound spike of anger, a rare physiological response in Cathar culture. "Transmit our formal response," he commanded, struggling to maintain the resonant stability of his voice. "Demand recognition, demand their intent. They have violated our sovereign space and are engaging in military actions without authorization." Zarin intervened instantly, his voice low and urgent. "Elder, the humans' analysis of our predicament is surgically accurate. They bypassed all diplomatic layers and went directly to the core problem. The Varith are still pressing. We must understand the human before we can condemn it." The translation interface flashed a waiting signal. The Aegis was awaiting response, not with impatience, but with the cold, measured detachment of a technician waiting for a machine to complete its calibration. Xylos inhaled deeply, filtering the pressurized air, forcing his emotional core back into equilibrium. "Very well. Send a direct, non-protocol query. Ask, why are you doing this? What is the cost?" The reply was almost immediate, accompanied by a subtle, almost imperceptible shift in the human's posture, a slight tilt of the head that the Cathar analysts later interpreted as interest, though stripped of any emotional weight. "Commander Vance, we are intervening because the Varith hegemony represents a systemic, non-remediable threat to the biodiversity and sapient integrity of this sector. Their behavior profile indicates terminal escalation and resource exhaustion, which will invariably destabilize the entire region. This is a matter of practical risk mitigation. The cost, as you inquire, is negligible. Our resources are self-sustaining. Our objective is defined as the maximum protection of complex life. You qualify." The words struck the conclave with the force of a weapon. Negligible, practical risk mitigation, maximum protection of complex life. This was not the language of empire, of conquest, or even of altruism as they understood it. It was the language of cosmic librarians cataloging potential threats to their library. Counselor Threll, representing the shattered industrial core, projected his voice. "Commander Vance, we require clarification. You deploy resources, you repel an existential threat, and yet you claim no transactional cost. This contradicts every established principle of interstellar interaction. We cannot process this input. What political or economic structure permits such massive expenditure without recompense?" The human Vance paused. It was a long, deliberate pause, perhaps the first sign of emotional complexity the Cathar had observed. When he spoke again, his voice gained a subtle layer of educatio. "Now gravity. Your definition of expenditure is flawed. We are expending minimal energy to achieve stabilization. The greater cost is allowing the Varith pathology to metastasize further. Regarding our structure, we are the United Earth, a species that once viewed war as a necessity, and thus we dedicated significant cycles to solving it as an engineering problem. We determined that the expense of prolonged conflict, the cultural fracturing, and the inevitable regression far outweigh the investment required for preemptive defense and stabilization of neighboring polities. We intervened because failure to intervene would be inefficient, strategically unsound, and morally detrimental to our own long-term evolution. We are not philanthropists. We are actuaries of sentient continuity. Xylos leaned back, the pressure field of his command platform momentarily fluctuating as he processed the input. Actuaries of sentient continuity. Humanity had not abolished war through moral elevation, but through radical, cold calculation of its immense asterisk waste. The technology you deploy, Xylos pressed, abandoning protocol entirely, driven by the urgency of intellectual hunger. The localized inertial negation, the spatial displacement without observable energy drain. These concepts exist only in the most advanced, theoretical physics archives of the Cathar sovereignty. How is one vessel utilizing capacity that our entire infrastructure has only charted in hypothesis? Vance nodded slightly, an acknowledgement that seemed to hold deep understanding of the Cathar pride inherent in the question. The difference is not capability, elder, but methodology. Your species relies on immense, powerful reactors to generate gross force. You attempt to push the universe into submission. Humanity, after solving the issue of localized mass-energy equivalency, focused on understanding the asterisk structure of reality. We do not push, we simply adjust the parameters of localized physics. The Aegis is not a warship. It is a highly sophisticated adaptive diagnostic tool. We are not utilizing advanced theoretical physics. We are utilizing optimized solutions. This vessel represents the equivalent of a standard search and rescue platform within the unified fleet doctrine. It is designed to navigate chaotic, unpredictable environments and rectify localized crises with minimal collateral damage. The conclave was silent, a search and rescue vessel. The realization crashed over the Cathar. They had been fighting a losing war of annihilation against the Varith, using technology that represented the pinnacle of their civilization, only to be saved by what amounted to an ambulance from a species they had barely catalogued. If this was a search and rescue platform, what in the name of the cosmic void did their actual military fleet look like? Vance, Xylos began, his voice now a mere whisper of sound that nonetheless commanded attention. You speak of efficiency and risk mitigation. The immediate risk is the loss of the Cathar sovereignty. If your intentions are strictly logistical, we must formalize this intervention. We offer you immediate access to our strategic databases, our historical records, and our entire repository of unexploited resources. In exchange, we request full, sustained military deployment against the Varith threat until it is fully neutralized. Vance's response was immediate and entirely unexpected, delivered with the same unnerving calm. Unnecessary. We already possess sufficient data regarding the Varith behavioral profile and Cathar system layout. Offering your resources is illogical. We do not require them. And the deployment of a full, sustained military is inefficient. We have already neutralized the core Varith tactical objectives in the immediate area. The battle is already concluded, though your systems have not yet registered the cessation of major aggression. The conclave erupted in confused murmurs. The projection showed fierce, ongoing conflict near Nexus 9. The Varith are still advancing, cried Threll, pointing a trembling appendage toward the holomap. They are executing predetermined, failing assault patterns based on outdated intelligence, Vance corrected calmly. Approximately 180 cycles ago, the Aegis deployed a high-density, multi-spectrum sensor network across the Varith deep space lines. We identified the core Varith command and control nexus, a specialized, sentient command ship designated the Butcher's Heart asterisk. We did not destroy it, as destruction only creates a vacuum to be filled by aggressive successors. Instead, we injected a localized, non-destructive logic virus into its primary communication and targeting network. This virus has induced a psychological state we categorize as systemic self-doubt. The Varith command is currently focused entirely on internal purges and questioning the loyalty of their primary commanders. Their offensive capacity has ceased. They are merely Osting on momentum, the Cathar fleets need only focus on containment and cleanup. The conclave stared at the human face, static and utterly controlled, struggling to comprehend the complexity of the maneuver. This was not war. It was strategic psychology delivered through technological superiority. They had fought for cycles, losing worlds and billions of lives, and humanity had resolved the conflict by giving the enemy a nervous breakdown. Your method, Xylos began, shaking his head slightly, is profoundly cynical yet simultaneously moral. You have achieved peace by technological subterfuge, avoiding mass casualties. It is simply the optimized solution, Vance affirmed. We do not engage in conflict unless the threat is non-negotiable. The Varith can be contained and eventually guided toward a sustainable resource model. They are merely operating on a flawed paradigm of expansion. We require your cooperation only in ensuring that the cleanup phase minimizes loss of Cathar infrastructure, as that infrastructure represents valuable potential in the wider galactic balance. The realization settled over Xylos with the weight of geological time. Humanity had intervened not because they cared about the Cathar specifically, but because they saw the Cathar as a valuable, if inefficient, piece of the larger cosmic puzzle. They were acting as custodians of the entire galaxy, viewing ancient empires like the Cathar as fledgling systems requiring guidance and protection from disruptive elements. We accept your stabilization efforts, Commander Vance, Xylos stated, his voice now devoid of authority, filled only with awe and cultural shock. The sovereignty bows to your superior strategic capability. We will comply with your directive regarding humanitarian staging, but we require further understanding. We require to know the nature of this species that treats existential warfare as a maintenance issue. Vance finally offered a subtle, almost academic smile. We anticipated this. We have prepared an informational briefing on our origins, philosophy, and current galactic mandate. It is designed to be fully transparent but requires cultural context. We suggest transferring a small diplomatic team to the Aegis immediately. Time remains a factor. The Varith self-doubt virus is finite. We need to transition the system to a stable Cathar-human joint containment framework. Xylos did not hesitate. Minister Zarin, assemble the delegation. You will go, you will observe, and you will attempt to understand the nature of these actuaries. Minister Zarin's transition from the dense, pressurized confines of the Cathar conclave to the interior of the Aegis of Sol Asterisk was a sensory shock. Cathar vessels were dark, complex mazes of functional architecture, emphasizing structural reinforcement and redundancy. The Aegis was a study in minimalist function and unexpected comfort. The atmospheric pressure was light, almost unsettlingly so. The air was subtly scented with organic material that Zarin's biological sensors identified as pine and cultivated moss, unnecessary hedonistic additions to a supposed military vessel. The diplomatic chamber was circular, bathed in soft, non-directional light that eliminated shadows. Commander Vance met them not in a posture of high command, but standing beside a large, transparent display surface that pulsed gently with non-critical data streams. He was accompanied by two other humans, one designated Dr. Livia Khan, a xenolinguistics specialist, and another silent figure designated Chief Engineer Taran, whose eyes held a deep, unnerving focus on the environmental readings. "Welcome aboard, Minister Zarin and members of the Cathar delegation," Vance greeted them, his tone cordial, professional, lacking any hint of triumphalism. "Please be seated. We understand the gravity of this moment for your sovereignty. We begin with transparency." Zarin's delegation, accustomed to the slow, deliberate pace of Cathar diplomacy, found the sudden shift to direct, open information disconcerting. "Commander Vance, we thank you for the hospitality, though the lightness of your environment is taxing to our physiology." "Adjustments initiated," Vance stated, and Zarin immediately felt the subtle, precise increase in atmospheric density, bringing the pressure closer to Cathar tolerance levels, an astonishing display of immediate technical responsiveness. "Dr. Khan will initiate the cultural briefing designed to address the foundational question: why does humanity engage in complex defense without demands?" Dr. Khan, a human female, activated the transparent display. Images began to flow, images of a blue and green world, images of ancient, brutal conflicts, then images of immense, coordinated planetary restoration projects. Humanity's technological and ethical breakthrough came not from discovering a new reaction drive or a powerful weapon, Khan began, her voice steady and clear, but from the realization that we were our own greatest threat. For centuries, our technology exceeded our collective wisdom. We mastered nuclear fusion, gene editing, and orbital mechanics long before we mastered sustainable governance and universal empathy. The consequence was predictable. We nearly erased ourselves several times, most critically during the century of systemic collapse, an era of bioengineered plagues, resource wars, and catastrophic climate feedback loops. She paused, allowing the images of planetary devastation to resonate. The Cathar delegates watched, fascinated by the raw, unedited footage of a species committing industrial suicide. "We survived," Khan continued, "not through military might, but through forced cooperation driven by the necessity of survival. When the dust settled, the remaining polities realized the fundamental truth. Conflict is the most wasteful endeavor a sapient species can undertake. It destroys material assets, intellectual capital, and cultural continuity. To achieve true longevity, humanity needed to ensure that no asterisk sentient species, including ourselves, ever reached that point of systemic collapse again. This led to the unified doctrine," Vance interjected. "It posits that the universe is rich in energy and matter, but excruciatingly poor in complex sentient life. Therefore, the strategic priority of the unified Earth is the protection of all sentient evolution, regardless of origin, and the enforcement of sustainable systemic stability. The Varith hegemony, due to its non-sustainable expansionist behavior, was classified as an unstable element that threatened the wider balance. Our intervention was merely a proactive measure to prevent regional collapse." Zarin struggled to assimilate the concept. A species that defined its core purpose not by its own territorial gain, but by the cosmic principle of preventing suffering. It was a level of detached, pragmatic ethics that the Cathar, whose entire history was rooted in defending ancestral territory, could not easily grasp. "You speak of efficiency," Zarin said, focusing on the only tangible metric he understood. "You say the Aegis is a search and rescue vessel. If this is true, what is the primary technology that allows such overwhelming strategic advantage against conventional fleets? Is it the power source, the reactor?" Chief Engineer Tarin, who had remained silent, finally spoke, her voice low and precise. "It is not the reactor, it is the sensor array. Cathar and Varith technology is focused on detection through emission and reflection. You look for heat, mass, or electromagnetic signature. We look for asterisk potentiality asterisk. We utilize adaptive quantum entanglement processing coupled with localized temporal scanning. We do not react to what an enemy asterisk is asterisk doing. We analyze the probability matrix of what they asterisk will asterisk do in the next 0.7 seconds. Khan activated a new holographic display. "Consider the engagement near Nexus 9. When the Varith capital ships began their high-energy maneuvers, your sensors registered massive engine output. The Aegis registered the precise moment the Varith command decided to initiate that output, before the energy even began to flow through the conduits. We then calculated the precise, minimal energy field required to collapse the local inertial dampeners at the exact moment the Varith expected them to function. We didn't fight their ships, we fought their expectations." The Cathar delegation exchanged silent, horrified understanding. They had been fighting a two-dimensional war of mass and energy, while humanity was operating in a hyperdimensional space of probability and intent. Their conflict was not merely technological, it was ontological. "And your restraint?" Zarin asked, the question fraught with political implication. "Why the logic virus? Why not simply destroy the Varith core command ship, ensuring immediate termination of the threat?" Vance met his gaze, his expression earnest. "Destruction is simple. Integration is difficult but necessary. The Varith are a sentient life form. They possess valuable cultural, biological, and technological data. To destroy them is to destroy that potential. We seek to rehabilitate the Varith into the galactic community, guiding them away from self-destructive expansion and toward sustainable practices. They have the capability to be contributors, not consumers. Our initial intervention must, therefore, be non-lethal, focusing on systemic rerouting rather than elimination." This was the final, devastating blow to the Cathar worldview. Humanity was so powerful, so supremely confident in its technological and ethical superiority, that it viewed its enemies not as threats to be eliminated, but as prodigal children to be disciplined and reintegrated. The Cathar, who were prepared to sacrifice their entire civilization to avoid surrender, were now confronted with a force that had intervened purely to prevent anyone having to sacrifice anything. "Commander Vance," Zarin conceded, leaning forward, the rigidity dissolving from his posture, "your philosophy is overwhelming in its scope. We accept the need for rapid transition to the joint containment framework, but we must understand your larger context. You speak of unified Earth and galactic balance. What is the scale of your civilization? How large is this unified fleet?" Vance looked briefly to Tarin, who offered a subtle shake of the head, and then back to Zarin. "That is sensitive data, Minister, primarily because context is easily lost. Let us simply state that the Aegis is one vessel operating far beyond our core exploration zones. It is equipped for long-term self-sufficiency and interaction with nascent polities. Our total capacity is sufficient to maintain systemic stability across the sectors we monitor. We are not an empire, Minister. We are a network of responsible neighbors. The statement was crafted to be non-threatening, yet it implied a reach and capacity that dwarfed the Cathar. A single, responsible neighbor had single-handedly resolved the ultimate threat to their existence. The following cycles were consumed by intense collaboration, a rapid, almost frantic integration of Cathar infrastructure data with the human strategic framework. Zarin and his team watched in silent amazement as the human crew of the Aegis Asterisk, all 47 of them, managed the logistics of containing the now confused Varith fleets across multiple stellar systems, simultaneously initiating the humanitarian relief effort within the devastated Cathar sectors and meticulously mapping the damage for future restoration. Vance, managing the entire operation with focused calm, often emphasized the importance of intellectual honesty. The primary failing of the Varith was not aggression but systemic deceit. They hid their resource depletion figures from their own populace, relying on expansion to delay the inevitable reckoning. Truth is a self-sustaining resource. It must be maintained. The Cathar, witnessing the calm efficiency, began to understand that humanity's strength was not just technological, but philosophical. They were powerful because they were ruthlessly honest with themselves about their own flaws, their own capacity for destruction, and the ultimate high cost of falsehood. High Elder Xylos, observing the communication feeds from the conclave, slowly began to dismantle the ancient political apparatus of the sovereignty. The transactional nature of Cathar politics, the endless maneuvering for advantage, seemed suddenly trivial, archaic, and deeply inefficient in the face of human simplicity and magnitude. The greatest threat to the Cathar was not the Varith, but their own outdated system of calculated paranoia. The stabilization phase lasted for 90 full cycles. The Varith hegemony, now crippled by internal chaos and technological suppression, had withdrawn to its core systems, where human-deployed monitoring assets ensured they could only engage in self-regulation. The Cathar, now operating under the guidance of the Aegis, found their economy and defense capacity rebounding with terrifying speed, purely through the implementation of human logistical principles. The time for the Aegis to depart approached. Commander Vance requested a final, comprehensive meeting with the entire Cathar conclave, which was now filled not with tension and fear, but with a deep, almost reverent curiosity. The atmosphere in the chamber was markedly cleaner, the lighting softer. The physical environment itself had begun to adopt the lessons of human efficiency. Xylos stood before Vance, who had projected his image directly into the conclave's void. "Commander Vance, you have saved our civilization. You have asked for nothing. You have taught us the meaning of pragmatic ethical duty. How do we, the Cathar sovereignty, repay this profound debt to the unified Earth?" Vance maintained his calm, level gaze. "The debt is not personal, Elder Xylos. It is systemic. You repay us by becoming a functional, stable contributor to the galactic community, by repairing your infrastructure efficiently, sharing your knowledge openly, and by embracing the principle of non-destructive conflict resolution. Your potential is immense. We require your stability, nothing more." "And what is the next step?" Zarin asked, standing beside Xylos. "Do we now join the unified Earth network? Do we become a protectorate?" "We are not an empire that seeks protectorates," Vance clarified. "We seek partners. Our role is guidance, not governance. The next step is already in motion. Chief Engineer Taran, if you would present the final analytical report." Taran's image appeared beside Vance, and the holographic map of the immediate sector dissolved, replaced by a deep space projection of the entire galactic arm, vast, shimmering, and overwhelmingly dense with stellar bodies. "During our integration of the Cath, our deep scan archives," Taran began, her voice gaining an edge of professional excitement, "we utilized our quantum entanglement processors to filter out the Varith noise, the pervasive high-intensity energy signatures associated with their aggressive expansion. In the resulting clean data set, we detected a phenomenon that the Cathar sensors have been registering for millennia but classifying as cosmological background radiation, an organized, structured signal originating from the galactic core." The conclave gasped. The galactic core was a mythic, dangerous place, a region of chaotic physics and extreme stellar density, avoided by all major polities. "This signal is not natural," Taran stated. "It is highly complex, modulated by principles of temporal geometry that suggest an antiquity far exceeding any known civilization, including the unified Earth. We categorize the source as precursor. Its structure suggests an ancient, immensely powerful defense network. Vance resumed the address. For eons, this network has been dormant, waiting. The Vareth hegemony, in its reckless pursuit of expansion, inadvertently violated a spatial boundary defined by this precursor network, a boundary that had previously been successfully avoided by the Cathar, largely through cautious stagnation. The twist, elders, is not that we have found a new threat, Vance said, his voice dropping slightly, conveying immense philosophical weight, but that we have found a sleeping policeman, and the Vareth's aggression woke it up. The signal is an automated, self-replicating sequence designed to categorize and eliminate systemic instability within the galactic framework. It is the ultimate insurance policy against chaos. Zarin stared, transfixed. You mean this network is preparing to execute a catastrophic, sector-wide purge of the Vareth, and potentially us if we are classified as unstable? Precisely, Vance confirmed. But the system is ancient, its parameters rigid. It relies on extremely sophisticated, non-adaptive threat assessment protocols. It classifies threats based on historical markers of instability, rapid, unchecked expansion, massive energy signature fluctuations, and internal self-destruction indicators. The Vareth meet all criteria. The Cathar, due to your recent near collapse and your desperate, high-energy defensive posture, currently rate as high-risk potential. A wave of palpable fear washed through the conclave, heavier than the old atmospheric pressure. They had survived the Vareth only to face the inevitable, cold judgment of a cosmic sentry system. However, Vance added, the shift in his tone bringing a sudden, sharp relief, the network is currently in its primary analytical phase. It is broadcasting vast, complex data requests into local space, attempting to find a handler, a stabilizing force that can attest to the current systemic health and vouch for regional polities. And you, Commander Vance, Xylos breathed, recognizing the profound significance of the human-s timing, you are receiving these data requests. The Aegis is uniquely suited to interface with the precursor architecture, Taran explained. Their use of localized temporal geometry and complex probability analysis aligns with human methodologies. We are currently responding to the network's requests, providing comprehensive, detailed analysis of the Cathar sovereignty's transition to stability and the Vareth hegemony's forced containment. We are acting as your advocate, attempting to convince the precursor network that the chaos has been resolved and that a sector-wide purge is unnecessary, inefficient, and detrimental to the long-term project of sentient life. Xylos felt a slow, dawning comprehension. Humanity had intervened not just to save the Cathar from the Vareth, but to position themselves as the necessary intermediary between ancient, overwhelming cosmic power and the fragile, chaotic current era. They were saving the galaxy from an ancient, well-meaning, but utterly inflexible security system. The ultimate strategic objective of the unified Earth, Vance concluded, is to assume the role of the galaxy's stabilizer, not through dominance but through competency. We must demonstrate to the precursor network that sentient life is capable of self-regulation, efficiency, and ethical restraint. If we succeed, the network will return to dormancy, allowing the polities of this region, including the Cathar, the autonomy to evolve. He paused, the human gaze intense and unwavering. This is the true cost, elders. You must join us in this effort. We need the Cathar deep cultural memory, your long historical perspective on regional conflict, and your industrial capacity to rebuild quickly and efficiently. You must prove that your species is worth protecting. We are not fighting Asterisk for you anymore. We are fighting with Asterisk you to demonstrate the inherent value of your existence. The conclave, which had spent cycles debating self-preservation and internal hierarchy, was now confronted with the ultimate philosophical challenge, proving their own worth to a system beyond their comprehension, guided by a species whose moral logic was utterly alien yet undeniably sound. Xylos stepped forward, his segmented body rigid with resolution, stripped finally of the need for political maneuvering. Commander Vance, we understand the gravity of the task. We accept the burden of proof. The Cathar sovereignty will dedicate its entire remaining capacity to this unified effort. We will learn your methods, integrate your ethics, and strive for the efficiency required to justify our continuity. Tell us what is required to convince the silent sentry. Vance gave a profound, slow nod, a gesture of immense respect and acceptance. The first requirement is the immediate, complete cultural and technological integration with the Vareth containment zone. We must demonstrate not just defeat, but rehabilitation. We must show the network that we are capable of turning threats into contributors. This demands a level of ethical purity and logistical transparency that the Cathar have never before achieved. Dr. Khan added, "This is where humanity, the species that conquered its own destructive tendencies, is uniquely positioned. We understand the psychology of the self-destructive paradigm. We have prepared the initial interface protocols for the Cathar teams. We will manage this new frontier together." The holographic projection of the precursor signal intensified in the center of the conclave, bathing the chamber in cold, complex light. It was no longer a symbol of distant dread, but the focal point of a shared, overwhelming responsibility. Humanity had not brought conquest, they had brought accountability. They had arrived on a single ship, fought for no reward, and revealed that the true battle was not against external enemies, but against the very flaws inherent in chaotic, uncontrolled sapient evolution. The Aegis of Sol Asterisk, the search and rescue vessel, was not merely saving a species. It was guiding an entire sector toward maturity, preparing them for the ultimate, quiet burden of cosmic stewardship. The universe, vast and indifferent, now required collaboration, and humanity, having learned the bitter lessons of its own past, was ready to lead the charge into the uncharted territory of cosmic ethics. The Cathar, humbled and irrevocably changed, stood ready to follow. The age of small, localized conflicts was over. The age of unified galactic maintenance had begun.